She is not your kind of woman, Elijah. Harriet Voss didn't shout it. She said it the way she said everything. Quietly. Precisely. Like she was reading from a contract she'd already signed. She works at a laundromat. She has a son from a man who left. That is not the life I built for you. Elijah Voss set down his coffee cup. He didn't slam it. He didn't argue. He just set it down on the marble counter of his mother's kitchen, looked at her for a long moment and said, "Then maybe the life you built for me isn't mine." He walked out of that kitchen on a Thursday evening in April. His mother stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway of the house she'd designed, in the neighborhood she'd chosen, in the city she'd decided he would succeed in. She didn't call after him. She didn't need to. She assumed he would come back. She was wrong. What happened in the 11 months that followed would dismantle everything Harriet believed about success, about family, and about the woman she dismissed without ever once looking her in the eye. To understand why Elijah made that choice, you have to understand where he came from. Not the address, the history. Harriet Voss was not born into money. She grew up in Pensacola, Florida, the daughter of a school custodian and a woman who sewed alterations from a card table in the living room. They weren't poor in the way that made the news. They were poor in the quiet way, the kind where you keep the lights on in only one room at night because the bill is due and the check hasn't cleared. Harriet wore her cousin's clothes until she was 15. She ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day for 3 years of middle school and told herself it was because she preferred them. She was smart, the kind of smart that teachers noticed and guidance counselors circled back to. She got a scholarship to the University of Alabama, worked 2 jobs all 4 years, graduated with honors in accounting, and walked into a firm in Atlanta that nobody from her neighborhood had ever heard of. By 30, she was a senior partner. By 40, she'd started her own wealth management firm, Voss Capital Group. Her name was on the door, and on the building directory, and eventually on a Forbes list that her mother cut out and put in a frame, even though she didn't quite understand what it meant. Harriet married Franklin Voss when she was 32. He was charming and careless with money in the way only people who've always had it can be. He came from old Georgia money, the kind with a family crest and a lake house and an opinion about which fork goes where at dinner. They lasted 9 years. The divorce was civil. The settlement was complicated. The thing they produced together that mattered was Elijah, who was 7 when they split and grew up watching his mother build her empire, one 16-hour day at a time. Franklin died of a heart attack when Elijah was 24. By then, Elijah was already working for his mother's firm. Harriet raised her son to be careful. Careful with money, careful with people, careful with choices. She believed, with every fiber of her disciplined and self-made heart, that the right partner could protect everything she'd built. The wrong one could unravel it in a season. She had a type in mind for Elijah, someone with credentials. Someone with family stability. Someone who understood the weight of what the Voss name had come to mean. She never factored in what Elijah might want. Elijah Voss was 38 years old, and he was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. He had a beautiful apartment in Midtown Atlanta. He had a title, Vice President of Client Relations at Voss Capital. He had a car that turned heads and a closet full of suits and a contact list full of people who would take his call because of his last name, not because they knew him. He didn't know if he'd ever been known. Not really. His mother arranged dinners. His mother arranged introductions at charity galas. The women were accomplished and lovely and exactly what she designed them to be, and Elijah would sit across from them over glasses of wine and feel an absence so total it was almost physical, like something was supposed to be there and wasn't. He'd been engaged once. Claire Fontaine, the daughter of a financial attorney his mother had worked with for a decade. They dated for 2 years, gotten engaged, and 3 months before the wedding, Claire had looked at him over dinner at a restaurant that cost $400 a plate and said, "Elijah, I don't think you actually see me." She wasn't wrong. He hadn't been able to argue. They'd called it off quietly, the way people like them called things off, with a press release drafted by his mother's communications director and no public scene. His mother had cried. He hadn't. That scared him more than anything. he started running in the mornings. Not for his health, just to get out of himself for an hour. He'd run through different neighborhoods, taking different routes, adding distance every week until one morning in March, he found himself on a street in Vine City, a historic neighborhood on the west side of Atlanta, where the shotgun houses sat close to the sidewalk and the magnolias were just beginning to bloom. He stopped to stretch at the corner near a small strip of shops, a laundromat, a barber shop, a corner store with a hand-painted sign in the window. The laundromat was called Clean Slate. The lights were already on inside even though it was barely 7 in the morning. Through the glass, he could see rows of machines, most of them running, and a woman folding a sheet with the efficient, no-wasted motion precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times. He stood there longer than he meant to. 3 weeks later, his running route went past Clean Slate every morning. He didn't go in until the Tuesday it rained. He'd been caught without a jacket, which almost never happened, because Elijah Voss planned for things, but that morning he hadn't, and by the time he reached Clean Slate, he was soaked through his shirt, and his phone was blinking warnings about moisture. He pushed open the door. The warmth hit him first, the smell of clean laundry and dryer sheets, the low mechanical hum of the machines. The woman behind the counter looked up. She was maybe 35, with natural hair pulled back in a loose twist and dark eyes that registered him with calm, unhurried attention. She wore a clean slate polo shirt and had a pen tucked behind her ear and a child's drawing taped to the side of the register. "You dripping on my floor," she said, not unkindly, just factually. "I'm sorry, I got caught in." "Here." She handed him a clean folded towel from a stack on the counter. "I keep some for when this happens. You're not the first person to underestimate Atlanta weather." He dried off his face. Elijah Voss, who had negotiated multi-million-dollar portfolio restructurings, did not know what to say next. "Thank you," he managed. "Sit down if you want. It'll probably pass in 20 minutes. She gestured to a row of plastic chairs against the wall and went back to what she was doing. He sat. He watched the rain. He watched her work, the way she moved between the machines and the counter, checking timers, handing a bag to an older man who came in for his pickup, answering the phone with, "Clean slate, this is Tanya," all of it smooth and unperformed, like someone entirely comfortable in her own space. After a while she asked without looking up, "You run through here a lot." He paused. "You notice that? I open at 6:30. You go past around 7. You always stop at the corner to stretch your left calf more than your right." She glanced up briefly. "Occupational habit. I notice things." His name was Elijah, he told her. Hers was Tanya Coles. She owned Clean Slate. Had for 4 years. The rain passed in 18 minutes. He thanked her again for the towel. She said, "Bring it back. Washed, it's a laundromat, not a gift shop." He laughed. An actual laugh, the kind he hadn't expected. He brought the towel back the next morning, washed and folded. She raised an eyebrow. "You folded it?" "I watched a YouTube tutorial." "Of course you did." She put it on the counter. "You want coffee?" "I make a pot at 7. He did. Over the weeks that followed, Elijah learned Tanya Coles in the way you learn someone when there's no agenda and no performance. He learned her in pieces, the way you learn a neighborhood by walking it slowly. She'd grown up in Vine City. Her grandmother had owned the building where Clean Slate now operated. When her grandmother passed 4 years ago and left it to Tanya, most people assumed she'd sell it. The neighborhood was changing. Developers were circling. She could have walked away with enough money to start over somewhere comfortable. She hadn't. She'd renovated the space herself, with her own hands and a crew of 2 and more YouTube tutorials than she cared to admit. She'd reopened it as Clean Slate because, she said, the neighborhood needed it, not as a symbol, as a real, functioning laundromat where people who didn't have in-unit machines could come without feeling looked down on. She had a son, Marcus, who was 8, small for his age, obsessed with maps, and capable of telling you the capital of nearly every country on Earth if you gave him 30 seconds to think. His father, a man named Derek, had been gone since Marcus was 3. Not dead, just gone. The way some people are gone. Present enough to leave a shape in a life, but absent enough to leave a hole. Tanya didn't talk about Derek with bitterness. She talked about him the way you talk about a storm that came through and took part of the roof. It happened. You rebuilt. You moved on. Marcus came to clean slate every day after school. He did his homework at a folding table near the back, eating whatever Tanya packed him, asking the customers periodic geography questions. He considered it a form of community service. He met Elijah on a Wednesday in May. "What's the capital of Burkina Faso?" Marcus said by way of introduction. Elijah thought for a moment. "Ouagadougou." Marcus stared. "Most people say they don't know." "I almost said I didn't know." Marcus considered this. "Do you want to hear about the Ottoman Empire? I'm doing a project." "Sure." Tanya watched from behind the counter, and something shifted in her expression, something careful and private that she pulled back before it could show too much. Elijah started staying longer. He told himself it was the coffee. He told himself it was the neighborhood. He told himself a lot of things that weren't quite true, because the real thing, the actual thing, was that for the first time in years he walked into a place and felt like himself, not a Voss, not a VP, just Elijah, who had gotten caught in the rain and borrowed a towel and discovered that a woman who ran a laundromat in Vine City could make him laugh before 8 in the morning, and that an 8-year-old with a passion for world geography could make him feel like he had something worth saying. He hadn't told Tanya about his mother's firm, about the money, about any of it. He told her he worked in finance, which was true the way a surgeon saying they worked in medicine is true. Accurate, incomplete. He told himself the timing wasn't right. He told himself he'd tell her soon. What he didn't tell himself, because it was too uncomfortable to look at directly, was that for the first time in his adult life, he was being seen as a person and not as a portfolio, and he was terrified of losing that. His mother found out about Tanya the way Harriet Voss found out about everything, methodically. She'd asked Elijah's assistant, a careful young man named Seth, where Elijah had been spending his mornings. Seth, who was loyal but not brave, told her about the route change and the laundromat. By the next afternoon, Harriet had a name and an address and had made exactly 2 phone calls. She called Elijah on a Friday evening. "We need to have dinner, Sunday, my house." It wasn't a question. He came. He sat across from her at the long dining table where she served things like braised short ribs and heirloom tomato salad and expensive wine, and she waited until they were halfway through before she said, "Tell me about Tanya Coles." The room went very still. "I know about the laundromat," Harriet said. "I know about the child. I know about the father who isn't in the picture, and I know you've been going there every morning for 7 weeks. She put her fork down. "Elijah, I'm not doing this to control you. I'm doing this because I love you. That woman's world and our world, they don't connect. I've spent 30 years building something. I need you to protect it." He looked at her for a long moment. "What exactly do you think she's going to take from us, Mom?" "It's not about taking. It's about fit. It's about the future. You have responsibilities. You have the firm. You have—" "I have a life." His voice was quiet. "At least I'm trying to." "Elijah. She makes me feel like a person, Mom. Not an asset, not a successor. A person." He paused. "I can't remember the last time I felt that." Harriet Voss had survived a bad marriage and a harder divorce, and the death of an ex-husband she'd never stopped caring about entirely, and 30 years of a business world that had not made things easy for her. She was not a woman who cried easily. She didn't cry then. She straightened her posture and said, "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Elijah said. "But I'd regret the other thing more." He didn't go back to her house for a long time after that. What he did instead was tell Tanya the truth. He chose a Saturday morning in June. Marcus was at his grandmother's. The laundromat was in its slow mid-morning lull, machines turning, nobody waiting at the counter. Tanya was in the back folding commercial linens, a job she did every weekend for the hotel 2 blocks over. Elijah picked up a sheet from the pile and started folding the other end. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know." He kept folding. "Tanya, I need to tell you something." She looked up. He put the sheet down and turned to face her. "My last name is Voss, as in Voss Capital Group. My mother is Harriet Voss. She founded the firm. I've been VP of Client Relations there for 8 years. I have a trust, a portfolio, an apartment in Midtown that costs more per month than this building's annual insurance. The folding table held between them. Tanya didn't move. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to know the name before you knew me. I know that sounds like something people say to excuse things. I know it's not enough. I'm sorry I waited this long. The silence in the laundromat was very loud. Just the machines turning. Then Tanya said, "How much does the apartment cost?" It was so unexpected he almost laughed. $8,000 a month. She nodded slowly, like she was filing a number away. And your mother, she knows about me. Yes. And she doesn't approve. No. Tanya set down the sheet she was holding. Her voice, when it came, was even and careful and had something underneath it, something she was working to keep controlled. Elijah, I have a son. A real one, who knows your first name and tells you about the Ottoman Empire, and has started asking me if you're going to come to his school science fair. She paused. I let you into his life because I thought I knew who you were. And I did know who you were. And I did know who you were carrying. Tanya, I'm not angry about the money. I don't want your money. Her voice didn't waver. I'm angry because you let me teach you how to fold a fitted sheet, and you sat with Marcus every afternoon doing homework, and you let both of us believe we were on level ground. She looked at him directly. We were never on level ground. I know, he said. You're right. Your mother looked at my life and made a calculation, and somewhere in the back of my head, I've been waiting for you to make the same one. Here is something worth understanding. When a person who has been left before, by a parent, by a partner, by a system that decided they weren't worth the investment, when that person lets someone in again, they are not being naive. They are being brave. And the cost of that bravery, if it goes wrong, is not just heartbreak. It is the specific and devastating confirmation of the thing they feared most, that they were right not to trust. Tanya Coles had built something from almost nothing. She had raised a son who could name the capital of Burkina Faso and also made his own bed every morning without being asked. She had taken her grandmother's legacy and turned it into a living, working place that served her community. She had done all of this without a partner, without a safety net, without anyone to call at midnight when the pipes backed up or the commercial dryer threw a belt. And she had, very carefully and very against her own instincts, started to trust this man who showed up at her door in the rain. I need time, she told him. He nodded. Take it. He left. He didn't push. He didn't send flowers or make gestures. He went home to his Midtown apartment and sat in the quiet of it and thought about what it meant that he had let fear keep him from honesty, even when honesty was the only thing that could have saved what was growing between them. He called his mother that evening, not to reconcile, to say something he hadn't said clearly enough before. She's not a liability, Mom. She's a person. A good one. One of the best I've met. And if I lose her because of how long it took me to be honest, that's on me. But I won't let it be on you. Harriet was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What do you want from me, Elijah? Nothing right now. I just needed you to know I meant it. He hung up. 10 days passed. Elijah kept running his route, but he didn't go into clean slate. He went past it. He could see the lights on. He could see Tanya's shape moving behind the glass sometimes, and he kept moving because she had asked for time and he was going to give it to her even if it felt like walking barefoot over broken concrete. On the 11th day, he came around the corner at 7:15, and Marcus was sitting on the front step of Clean Slate with his backpack on, eating a granola bar. Mom said you could come in if you wanted, Marcus said, but she said I had to tell you first that she's still deciding. That's fair, Elijah said. I think you should come in, Marcus said, for what it's worth. Why? Marcus thought about it with the seriousness he applied to most things. Because you stayed when you didn't have to. Derek didn't stay. Most people don't stay. Elijah sat down on the step next to him. He didn't say anything for a moment. Marcus, your mom is one of the strongest people I've ever met. I know, Marcus said. I keep telling people that. They don't always listen. He stood up. hitched his backpack. Come on, she made the good coffee today. The kind with the cardamom. Elijah stood and followed him inside. They didn't fix it in a morning. That's not how trust works. Trust, once cracked, heals the way a bone heals, slowly, with pressure, and stronger in the end than it was before, but only if you let it rest right. They talked for a long time, really talked. Elijah told her about Claire, about the engagement that ended without tears, about growing up in his mother's orbit and learning to be competent at everything except the things that mattered most. Tanya told him about Derek, about the year after he left when she worked double shifts and her mother kept Marcus, and she'd go weeks without sleeping a full night. Not from overwork, but from the specific anxiety of knowing that no one was coming to help, that it was only her, that it would always be only her, and having to make peace with that. I made peace with it, she said. But making peace with something doesn't mean it stops hurting. No, Elijah said, it doesn't. I don't need you to rescue me, she said. I need you to understand that I'm not waiting to be rescued. This isn't a situation. This is my life. And Marcus is not a complication. He's the whole point. I know that, Elijah said. He's one of the best things about walking through that door. Tanya looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, show up. That's all. Every day. Don't perform, don't explain yourself. Just show up. He did. He was there on Tuesday mornings when she opened. He was there on Saturdays when the commercial load came in from the hotel, and 2 extra sets of hands made a 2-hour job into 45 minutes. He came to Marcus's science fair. Marcus's project was a hand-drawn map of every trade route used by the Byzantine Empire, rendered in colored pencil on 4 taped-together poster boards. It won second place. Marcus was furious about second place. Elijah took him to get ice cream and told him the Byzantine Empire project was, objectively, better than whatever had gotten first, and Marcus spent 45 minutes explaining why he agreed. Harriet Voss heard about the science fair from Seth, who heard it from a colleague who'd seen Elijah at the school. She called Elijah that night. Was it a good project? She asked. He was surprised enough by the question that he answered honestly. It was incredible. The kid knows things I never learned. There was a pause. I'd like to meet her, Harriet said, if she's willing. I'm not asking to approve anything. I know that's not my role anymore. A longer pause. I've been thinking about some things. What things? About what I decided about her before I knew her. About what that says. Her voice was careful, measured, the way it always was. I'd like the chance to correct it. Elijah relayed the message to Tanya, word for word. He didn't add anything. He didn't interpret it. He just told her what his mother had said and let her decide. Tanya thought about it for 2 days. Then she said, Sunday. Here, dinner. Harriet Voss arrived at Clean Slate on a Sunday evening in October. She drove herself. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry except her watch, and she carried a sweet potato pie she'd made herself from a recipe her own mother had used, which she hadn't made in 20 years. Tanya opened the door. The 2 women looked at each other. Mrs. Voss, Tanya said. Ms. Coles. Harriet held out the pie. I made this. I'm not sure I made it right. I'm a little out of practice. Tanya took it. She looked down at it and then back up. Come in. They ate in the back of the laundromat, which Tanya had turned into something that shouldn't have worked, but did. A folding table covered with a good cloth, candles in mason jars, plates that didn't match but were clean and warm. Marcus had helped set up and had placed a small handmade flag from Burkina Faso at Harriet's seat because, he'd told Tanya, it was important to make guests feel recognized. Harriet sat down and looked at the flag. A Ouagadougou, she said quietly. Marcus stared. You know it? I looked it up, she said. Elijah told me you asked him. Marcus sat down across from her with the gravity of someone about to conduct an important interview. Do you know any other capitals? Give me a continent. Africa. She named 6 before she slowed down. Marcus was visibly delighted. The dinner was not easy. It wasn't meant to be easy. Harriet said the things she needed to say, and she said them looking at Tanya directly, not performing them for Elijah. not softening them into platitudes. She said she had made a judgment without information, which in her professional life was the kind of error she would never permit herself. She said she had let her own history, her own fear of what poverty could do to a life, make her cruel in ways she hadn't examined until recently. She said she was sorry. Not the kind of sorry that comes with conditions, just sorry. Tanya listened. She didn't make it easy. She didn't say, "It's fine," or "I understand," or any of the things people say to let someone off the hook. She said, "Thank you for saying that. I'm going to need to see it in how you act, not just how you talk. I'm sure you understand the difference." Harriet nodded slowly. "I do." Marcus refilled everyone's water without being asked. He considered himself the host. Here is something that research in family dynamics has confirmed for decades. Repair between people who have hurt each other is not an event. It is a direction. A choice made repeatedly, in small moments, over a long time. An apology opens the door. Everything after that is the work of walking through it. Harriet began that walk. She showed up the next Sunday, not with the weight of what she'd said and needed to fix, but with a chess set and the information that Marcus had mentioned he was learning. She taught him the Queen's Gambit. He beat her in 43 minutes. She demanded a rematch. He made her earn it. She came back the Sunday after that. And the one after that. Elijah watched his mother sit on a plastic chair in the back of a laundromat in Vine City, losing at chess to an 8-year-old who called her Miss Harriet and updated her weekly on developments in Byzantine history. He watched her stop looking at her phone when they talked. He watched something in her face loosen that he hadn't seen loose since he was very young, since before his father left, since before the firm became everything. The wedding was on a Saturday in March, the same month Elijah had first wandered into Clean Slate with rain in his shoes. They held it in the neighborhood. Friendship Baptist Church 2 blocks down, the reception in the courtyard behind the laundromat, which Tanya had strung with lights and filled with folding tables and mismatched chairs and more food than anyone could finish. Tanya wore a cream dress she'd found at a consignment shop and altered herself. She was not a woman who needed a thing to be expensive to make it hers. Marcus walked her down the aisle. He wore a bow tie and took the job with the seriousness he applied to everything. When they reached the front, he told Elijah in a stage whisper that carried to the 3rd row, "Take care of her. She takes care of everybody else." Elijah looked down at him. "I know. That's why I'm here." Harriet Voss sat in the front row on the bride's side, which had been Tanya's suggestion and had made Harriet press her lips together for a moment in the way she did when something moved her that she wasn't ready to show. She did not wear her power suit. She wore the same dress she'd worn to Sunday dinner 2 months before, because it was the dress she'd been wearing when Marcus told her that Ouagadougou was also notable for its film festival, which she had not known, and she thought of it as a lucky dress now. She cried during the vows. She didn't try to stop it. Elijah did not go back to Voss Capital Group. He left the firm in the spring, amicably with his mother's reluctant blessing, and started something he'd been thinking about quietly for months. A small real estate advisory practice that worked specifically with neighborhood business owners in transitional areas of Atlanta, helping them navigate property deals, secure fair lease terms, protect the buildings that had been in their families for generations from the particular kind of legal pressure that came when developers decided a neighborhood was interesting. His first client was Tanya. He restructured the commercial agreement on the Clean Slate building so that it couldn't be bought out from under her regardless of what happened to the surrounding property values. Harriet invested in the practice, not because it was going to make her rich, because when Elijah explained it to her, she sat quietly for a moment and said, "I grew up watching people lose buildings like that. I could have done something about it 30 years ago." She paused. Better late. Tanya kept running Clean Slate. She added 2 machines and extended her hours on Sundays. She hired a young woman from the neighborhood who was working her way through community college. She believed, as she always had, that a business should take care of the people around it, not just the people who owned it. Marcus turned 9 in April. His birthday party was at the Laundromat because he said it was his favorite place, and also because the courtyard fit more people than their apartment. Harriet brought the cake. Chocolate with buttercream. She'd made it herself, which Marcus announced to everyone present as though it were an athletic achievement. He was not wrong. On a Sunday evening in November, 4 people sat at the folding table in the courtyard behind Clean Slate. The string lights were on. The air had that quality it gets in Atlanta in the fall. Cool and soft and almost golden. Tanya had her hands around a mug of tea. Marcus was showing Harriet something in a library book about the Silk Road. Elijah was watching all of them. He thought about what his mother had built. All those years, all that discipline, all that sacrifice, the buildings with her name on them, and the clients who called her first and the name that opened doors. He had grown up thinking that was the whole of success. The accumulation, the protection, the careful, calculated life. He thought about walking into a laundromat in the rain with a waterlogged phone and no plan. He thought about a woman who could fold a fitted sheet in under a minute and make coffee with cardamom and had taught him, without trying, that the strongest thing a person can be is honest about what they need. He thought about an 8-year-old boy who had looked at him on a front step and said, simply, "Most people don't stay." He had stayed. That was all. And it had turned out to be everything. Clean Slate was never meant to be a love story. It was a laundromat, a place where people brought what needed washing and left with it clean. But sometimes the thing that gets cleaned is something you didn't know was dirty, something you'd been carrying so long you'd stopped noticing the weight. If you're someone who has been told you're not the right fit, not the right class, not the right kind of person for someone else's story, hear this: the people who say that are measuring you against a version of worth that doesn't account for character, for steadiness, for the specific kind of love that gets up at 6:30 and opens the doors and keeps the lights on for whoever needs to come in out of the rain. That kind of worth doesn't show up on a balance sheet, but it builds the only things worth keeping. I keep thinking about what Marcus said on that front step. Most people don't stay. He's 8 years old. He said it the way kids say true things, plainly without knowing how much it lands. But I've been turning it over ever since, because I think it's the whole story really, not just Elijah's story, all of ours. We live in a world that rewards the people who leave. Leave when things get hard. Leave when someone doesn't fit the plan. Leave when the math doesn't add up on paper. Harriet Voss wasn't a villain. She was a woman who had survived poverty by becoming someone who never got caught without a plan again. And somewhere in the building of that armor, she had started to confuse protecting her son with controlling his life. That's not cruelty. That's fear wearing the mask of love. I've seen it. I've probably done it. What undid her wasn't an argument. It wasn't Elijah raising his voice or drawing a line in the sand. It was Tanya, quiet and steady, and completely unwilling to perform smallness for anyone's comfort. It was Marcus, asking her which African capitals she knew, completely unbothered by the name on her watch or the car she drove. The truth dismantled Harriet the way it always does, not with force, but with patience, with a chess game, with sweet potato pie. That's what moral clarity actually looks like in a life, not a grand gesture. Tanya didn't lecture Harriet. She didn't demand an apology. She just said, "I need to see it in how you act, not just how you talk." That's character. That's the kind of integrity that takes years to build and about 30 seconds to recognize when you're standing in front of it. Elijah recognized it because, somewhere under the tailored suits and the carefully constructed resume of a life, he still knew the difference between real and performed. That capacity for honesty. About himself, about his own silence, about the fear that had kept him from telling Tanya the truth. That was the thing that saved what they were building. And Tanya. Tanya, who got up at 6:30, who fixed the machine herself, who packed a note in her son's lunch that said, "You are my sunshine," every single day, even the days she had nothing left. She didn't survive on luck or grace. She survived on a particular kind of endurance that doesn't make the news because it looks too much like ordinary life. Waking up and doing it anyway. Not because it was easy. Because Marcus needed her to. I think about what it costs to stay when leaving is easier. It costs you something every time. But it also builds something. In you. In the people watching. Marcus grew up watching his mother stay. And then one day a man showed up in the rain and he stayed too. And Marcus, who had seen what it looked like when someone didn't, knew the difference immediately. That's how it works, I think. Not in speeches, in patterns, in the slow accumulation of showing up. We become what we practice, and we teach others what to expect by what we're willing to do consistently when nobody's grading us. Elijah gave up a corner office and built something that protected the buildings people like Tanya's grandmother had worked a lifetime to keep. Harriet invested in it. Not because it made financial sense, because she finally understood what her son had been trying to tell her at that dinner table. That the most valuable thing she'd ever built wasn't Voss capital. It was the part of herself she'd almost buried under it. None of this was inevitable. It was chosen, repeatedly, by imperfect people who kept deciding, one small moment at a time, to do the harder and more honest thing. That choice is available to all of us, every single day.